U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has nominated Brooke Rollins to oversee the Department of Agriculture, the last of his top cabinet picks. Rollins is the president of the America First Policy Institute. The right-wing think tank worked closely with Trump's campaign and has shaped the incoming administration's controversial policy agenda. Trump's cabinet nominees still have to be approved by the Senate. Let's get more with Mike Hanna. He joins us from West Palm Beach in Florida. Mike, good to see you. So Trump has now completed his picks for cabinet. It's an eclectic array of people. What reaction has there been to his choices?
Well, the president-elect has announced on his social media column that Americans, the Trump cabinet is complete, and so it is. A few minor roles still to be filled, but astonishingly, 2.5 weeks after the election, he's filled every single top cabinet position, made the nominations for them. Now, it's startling and it's interesting to compare to what happened last time in 2016 when Trump took over the administration. There he relied on establishment figures and put mainly establishment figures into cabinet posts. Now it's completely different, as though he learned something in that particular process. He has basically holed up here at Mar-a-Lago, gone through all the decisions, largely by himself, with some advisors, obviously, but has named a cross-section of people, all of whom have one common thread, and that is utter loyalty to the president-elect. Now, it is an astonishing array of individuals, ranging from a pro-union person as the Labor Secretary, a man who's a former protege of George Soros, the man Republicans hate the most, as Treasury Secretary, incidentally, the first openly gay man to be appointed to the Treasury Secretary position. But in addition as well, he's got very controversial figures, a Fox News host as Secretary of Defense, for example, a former wrestling executive as Secretary of Education. So these are all nominations that have to go through the Senate. Now, to put this into a context, Trump will have to make some 4,000 appointments in the administration. Of these, as many as 1,200 will have to be confirmed by the Senate. Now, this is a laborious, long process, and particularly with the controversial picks, it's going to be very difficult to get some of these picks through the Senate, even though it is dominated by Republicans. Many Republicans have already made very clear their discomfort with the nomination of Scott Hepseth, for example, as the Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense. So this is going to be a lengthy process, but Trump has basically cleared the runway by making these appointments so quickly. 2.5 weeks, as I said, after the election. He's left plenty of time for the lobbying process to get underway and for the connections with the outgoing administration to be made. We've already heard, for example, that Mike Waltz, his national intelligence pick, has been in touch with his Democrat counterpart in the Biden administration. So these processes can get underway, waiting for those Senate confirmations to take place. The contacts can be made, the lobbying can go on. So Trump has made it basically far easier for himself to get this administration in place than he did the last time he was president.
Okay, many thanks for that. Mike Hanna there from West Palm Beach in Florida. Well, President-elect Trump has denied knowing anything about Project 2025. That is a 900-page set of proposals promoting a right-wing vision of how to run the United States. The Heritage Foundation paper focuses on deregulation and smaller government. Let's speak now to Eric Ham. He's a U.S. political analyst. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Really good to see you, Eric. So during the election campaign, Trump distanced himself from Project 2025, didn't he? But when you look at some of the picks, we're actually seeing people who are behind that document. How significant is that?
Well, it's not really surprising at all, particularly when you understand the fact that the Heritage Foundation came out with a very similar document in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. And we know when Donald Trump was elected, 66% of their Project 16 policy proposals were actually implemented by Donald Trump. And now that Donald Trump will be back in the White House, it is expected that many of those same policy prescriptions from Project 2025, will also be implemented by Donald Trump, because, again, we know that many of his team, as well as Donald Trump himself, adhere to a lot of these conservative principles that are being proposed by the Heritage Foundation.
Eric, what do his picks say about experience versus loyalty and how that might shape Trumpism in the coming years?
Well, I think when you look at some of the more controversial picks, those certainly stand out. And what it speaks to is that Donald Trump, above anything else, certainly values loyalty, even over competence and experience. And so this is going to be an administration that is truly Donald Trump, and it's of Donald Trump's making, without any of the input or advice from the establishment of Republicans and the Republican Party. And so clearly this is an administration that Donald Trump has made in and of himself. The question now, given the fact that we know that there are still thousands of other political appointments to be made, it's an open question as to whether or not Donald Trump will even fill all of those appointments, or if he will leave some open, or if there will be more MAGA loyalists who will actually fill those cabinet and those appointment positions.
Well, how do you expect Washington establishment to react to these appointments? I mean, could we see clashes within departments?
I think, well, the big question now is, will all of these nominees actually get confirmed? Now, Donald Trump certainly has gained tremendous experience this time around, having already named many of these nominees. And so he has floated them as trial balloons to give them opportunities to actually get to know many of the senators, to make their confirmations much more smoother. Of course, we see what happened with Matt Gaetz. And so I think Donald Trump clearly learned his lesson there. But again, there are a number of people that are going to be easily confirmable. People like Senator Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State, and we know Doug Burgum as well as Secretary of Interior. So Donald Trump has a wide swath of people who are well liked by the establishment, and some who may not have an easy confirmation process. People like Pete Hesketh and former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as well.
Okay, really good to get your perspective. Eric Hamp, U.S. political analyst, speaking to us there from Washington, D.C.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.